Support for this show comes from Lead Quizzes. Lead Quizzes helps you easily set up high-converting quizzes to capture and qualify leads for your business. Visit leadquizzes.com/podcast to get a 14-day free trial today.
And each one of those steps, I think, is created not just a business kind of hurdle, but personally. I don't know how much people talk about that, but, I remember nights on the ground crying. I've been working 18, 19 hours straight, and I'm just losing relationships with friends, family, things like that. So those are times where, you think about quitting, and it's hard, right?
From Lead Quizzes, it's Journey to Seven Figures, a show about entrepreneurs and the stories behind how they grew their business to seven figures and beyond. We cover the good, the bad, and the ugly, and the lessons they learned along the way. Anthony Sarandria was getting tired of his marketing agency's time for dollars model and decided to switch to a pay-for-performance lead gen model in the debt settlement space. He now spends $15,000 a day on Facebook ads, generating as many as 5,000 calls a day. He's helped settle over $100 million in debt and has scaled Pocket Your Dollars to over $500,000 a month in just 1 year. Hey, Anthony, welcome to the show.
Hey, Joe. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Well, hey, I'm excited to talk to you today. So we're going to talk about your business, Pocket Your Dollars, how you guys grew to $1.5 million in less than a year. You guys are up to about $500,000 a month now. Why don't we start there? Tell me how you guys got the idea for this and, how you're able to be so successful so quickly with your background.
Great question. I appreciate it. Yeah, we started actually as a traditional internet marketing agency, selling time for resources, if you will. And some of the challenges that I think led to the pivot or what we're doing today were, I remember getting a client site ranking number one everywhere on the planet. They loved it. And I said, okay, great. Well, great working with you, and shook our hand and walked away. And I was like, well, we just spent, maybe a year, 2 years building long-term value. And now, we don't get to share in the upside. And B, I guess we kind of have done our job. And it made sense to me. And then two, not owning that asset or having that, and then the scalability behind what we were doing as well too. We're all challenges that led to this model, which is today it's selling leads or being a lead generator. And we've even now matured more to owning our own products and DIY versions and things like that, which I can dive into. But the specific space for in the debt space or in the financial space, I think came about, we were looking for a kind of an uglier taboo market, does things more old school, direct mail, things like that, where we could come in and kind of take a new age approach to marketing and really disrupt it and change the landscape. I mean, my space is filled with boiler rooms where people don't cursing or don't treat people nice. And, we flip it on our head, and I can dive more into this as well too. The Christian base where we're a help, we own a help center that walks people through on where they can get help, and that, they pray before and then greet them versus yelling at them on the phone right away. So I think that's part of what made the space so attractive. And then obviously just the growth of credit card debt in America and the challenge there. And then obviously the intrinsic kind of motivation, really trying to make a substantial difference in an industry where you can help a ton of people. So those are all what made the industry lucrative and the model and where it came from. And I'm happy to dive more in depth into any of that.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. So you guys had this agency. So that's kind of where you picked up the digital marketing background and experience from. We're getting a little bit frustrated by some of the general issues with agencies. And so you guys decided to go into a new industry that met your checklist of something that was eager for disruptment. So you guys picked the debt settlement space. So, you're not setting up the whole debt settlement business. You're really focusing on the lead generation side right now. So how did you guys go about finding the people that you're going to connect the leads with and that kind of thing?
Well, great question. So a couple of things. One is, I think you and I talked before this, we'll get more in depth in this as far as just continuing to get more integrated with the business. And eventually we will be settling, everyone's debt and do it in-house. But I think to prove out the model and learn early on, it was exactly like you said, it's brokering leads to people that actually do the fulfillment. And it became very similar to how we would pitch an agency client, except the sale became massively easier. So versus saying, hey, Jeremy, you want to pay me $10,000 to do SEO on your site and you'll get results. And I know, trust me, you will, it'll be great. It's not black and white. It's not productized. It's not as tangible. Versus now we come to a company and we say, hey, we'll sell you a phone call for $75 and you have 60 seconds or you have a minute or 2 minutes to make sure it's a live body, make sure that to a high level, your criteria have X amount of debt, have a job. And then boom, now that you're talking to a warm live body inbound call, pay me for every single one of those. That sale itself became a heck of a lot easier of a conversation for someone to say, yeah, let me try out 10 of them. And then it was like almost like crack in a way. They get a little taste and say, okay, I want more and more and more and more of this, because it's like selling a coffee cup. Once you get it and you have it, versus the idea of, I'm going to sell you this ceramic object that's going to be able to help you drink liquid. And it's like, I kind of get it. I kind of understand it, versus like, boom, I put the cup right in front of you. You go, oh, got it. I can put my coffee in this and drink it. So that was how we got started. And so it wasn't tremendously different from what we were doing. It was just a different conversation that made it substantially easier.
Yeah, that's awesome. So it's a really good value proposition. Obviously, you're taking on the risk of like spending your own money to acquire these leads and push them to them.
Right.
But yeah, that's obviously, it takes some risk away. And so, you have a lot more upside potential.
Well, it also gives a lower barrier to entry, right? Or it's, try out 10 of these if you like them, or, whatever a good sample size is, 50 of them, versus like an SEO, 10 grand a month for the next, could be the next year. I mean, we still have our agency and that works. And that model is great. And we help change a ton of business lives through that. It's just the conversation of, hey, just give it a shot. I don't know if the barrier to entry is the right word I'm looking for here, but it's a lot easier to dip your feet in versus having to dive headfirst into the water. And then we're finding, people dip their feet in and they're diving headfirst in. So yeah, I totally agree.
Sure. Yeah. And I think you bring one of the most valuable pieces of the table. So when you do choose to expand and maybe you take on more operations, you already got a really great start. So I think that's awesome. So you like basically found these partners that you'd sell these calls to. How did you start generating leads for them?
Great question. So we started day one literally in a coffee shop with about $100 campaign, and it was profitable, and it was on Facebook and running Facebook ads. And I think everybody finds it funny or cool we didn't even have a website for probably the first 60 to 90 days of business. We didn't have a website. We ran it through a Facebook page. We ran Facebook lead ads, and then we'd put them through a series of text message and auto phone call system to get them actually transferred over to a buyer. So just getting started, I think for me in my past business life, and I'm sure you can relate to, or anybody on the podcast, I've got to do this. You got 19 things you have to do before you can ever step foot forward, versus kind of like I take the fail fast mentality and say, hey, let's throw out a lead ad. What's the minimal investment I need to do to get something moving? So that's what we took, and we hit a home run with it. And then we can figure it out from there to get more legitimate or more long-term, start thinking 30, 50 years down the road. And I know we'll talk about some of those things too. But yeah, that's how we got started. We launched a Facebook lead ad, which people, if someone on the podcast isn't aware, it's basically people are able to opt in with their information directly in their Facebook newsfeed versus having to go fill out a form on a site or anything like that. So the second they would fill that out, they'd get an automatic call that would say, thank you for filling this out. Press 1 to speak with someone. If they did that, boom, then they were talking. If they didn't, we put them through an automated text message sequence to basically move them. When's a better time to chat, things like that. We layered some things like some artificial intelligence on it that made the conversation more real and helped move those rates. And I can dive deeper into that. But yeah, at a high level, that's how we got started.
Okay, awesome. So you guys had someone lined up ready to take the calls. And so let's talk a little bit more about your Facebook strategy. So what kind of ads were you running that were getting people attracted? Maybe you could talk through that a little bit. And then were they expecting that call? Like, were you guys pre-framing that? And we could go into like the SMS strategy as well.
Yeah, great question. I like your second question a ton, which is, were they expecting a call? And now we're thinking, how can we pre-frame really at the end of the day, signing up for the program, things like that, where I think a lot of marketers or a lot of companies, will come in and they'll say, it'll kind of pull a bait and switch, right? Like, hey, download this. And all of a sudden they get blown up with calls for the next 50 years. And the people are like it's a bad user experience for the customer. It's got lower conversion rate, things like that. So to answer your question, yes, absolutely. Frame, you know exactly what you're signing up for, what you're getting. You're going to get a call, an immediate call. Second, you fill out this form. It's going to be exciting. You might have 1 to 2 minute hold times, really thinking through what's the entire sales cycle, even though we didn't and still don't to an extent own the full sales cycle right now. What does that look like? Because I think we knew, if we did own let's call it the settlement process, which we will shortly, we know that our partners, more specific to our case, they need to be making money in order for us to be making money. So if we own the entire process, obviously, we could shove leads all day and say, look, we're driving phone calls at X amount of dollars or leads, things like that. What does that actually equate to revenue, and what's the profitability on that? So yes, definitely framed what's going to happen, made it very, very clear what the process is going to be like after this. As far as the actual campaigns themselves, we started kind of like a funnel cake, and now it's really, really mature and in depth, just at a $100 campaign level. We ran basically a we'll call it almost like a high level awareness ad where anyone and their mother that was interested in or showed some kind of interest in debt, or they were Christian actually as well too. So that was really the only two criteria, which you can imagine were millions and millions of people. And we basically just shared an ad with the president that was speaking on the debt crisis in America. And that was really it. And then anyone who watched a certain percentage of the video or engaged with it or anything like that, they then got put into a separate bucket that offered this free consultation, basically fill out a form here, learn how much your debt could be settled and things like that. So it was first just educating on something public that was out there, which in our case was just the president speaking about how bad debt is in America. And then second from there, if they took action, we then bucketed into something else. If they didn't, they went into another very similar where they would receive, high level notice on financial crisis in America or credit score or something like that. And then, as they're, and now that we've got more mature in our funnel, as people take actions and kind of start raising their hands for things, or even like without purposefully knowing they're raising their hand, like watching, 3 seconds of the video or liking or commenting, things like that. To us, those are all positive indicators. And, we call them internally IOIs, indicators of interest, where then we need to move them and treat them differently than someone who hasn't showed that interest.
Awesome. So yeah, I think those are really good. Let's talk about the text message real quick, because I think a lot of people, like when they set up a campaign, maybe like this, maybe they set up something very similar and they're not getting the amount of calls that they want. A lot of people will just give up right there. So you guys went a step further and said, how can we optimize this, like this funnel? And you guys picked text message. So can you walk me through like your strategy of what you guys did there?
For sure. Yeah, I think the first challenge was the idea of form fills. And a lot of this we got to hear through the grapevine, through the agency, but the lack of response rates on a form fill. So, we'd have clients that they'd only get in contact with 30% of their form fills, which, it makes sense to an extent. Someone filled it out and then they get busy with their life and they move on. But even that's kind of unacceptable or not able to be profitable. So we started thinking, okay, once a form fill comes through, what can we do to make sure we get that individual on the phone? And a lot of that is the timeliness, right? It's if a potential lead comes through and they're not getting contacted, really within a few minutes or immediately in this case, you're likely lost them. They got busy with their life or they're doing other things or whatever is going on. So that was kind of the idea or motivation behind it. And then for us, we looked at where is there the least noise in marketing, if you will, and A has the highest touch. And for us, it was text message. And, people could argue that, and I wouldn't necessarily disagree with it. But for us, that was our initial mentality was everyone's got their cell phone glued to their hip. There's a lot of compliancy, which we learned and made sure that we were following as well, too, around text messaging. So you can't get blown up a ton with spam text. Some people do, but it made it a really awesome avenue for us to get in front of. And then the auto callback software that I mentioned as well, too, or solution, which some of this is custom built, which I don't want to get too in depth with because I think some of the listeners might kind of turn off from it because it's software and development and things like that. But I think the principles still stand there, which is basically where is there the least noise in your space that has the highest touch, and that's why we chose that. And then we moved them through. It's a scheduling software is really what it is. It's helping them. When are you free? Are you free at lunch? Great, we'll call you back then. The system calls them back then. But you could do all of this too unautomated. It would obviously be a lot more tougher at scale. But, if I'm talking to, let's say, a lawyer's listening on here, like a lot of this could be manually, having the paralegal or the front desk girl, making sure that the second a form comes through, they're calling them within 3 minutes, making that like a staple within the company has to happen. They get a text right away if they don't answer. Then there's a follow-up process an hour later, 2 hours later, 5 hours. You know what I mean? So I think that process could be built out without even necessarily the specificity of our solution that we built, a lot of it internally. So,
okay, awesome. Yeah, I think those are really good strategies so far. So you guys started with $100. You guys got to 300 a day pretty quickly, I think, within that first month. And now you guys are at $15,000 a day on your Facebook ad spend, which results in about 65% of your leads. So are there any other strategies you want to share around maybe your retargeting or how you've been able to scale that so effectively?
Yeah, great question. A lot of it is just segmentation and talking to people differently, right? So I think you and I were joking before this. When I first started, we were like, yeah, we're helping people get out of debt. And then we quickly learned we're like, oh, there's different types of debt. There's tax debt, student debt, let's just call credit card debt. Let's just use those 3. Well, those are dramatically different people. The person in credit card debt could be, an immigrant that came over that was handed a piece of plastic and didn't realize they needed to pay it back. And all of a sudden they're $30,000 in debt later. Where a tax debt individual could be a business owner that, has a $100,000 bill to the IRS that they can't pay back. student loan, again, too, could be a younger individual or whatever it looks like. So those understandings, instead of we help you get out of debt, now all of a sudden it quickly became this type of debt. And then now how do you dive even deeper into that? So someone that's in let's go again, credit card debt, what are the different personas in there, and who motivates who? Is it, a Christian, it's against their religion, and I grew up Christian too, to be in debt, you're a slave to creditors. So wow, that really pulls where, we initially thought it was African Americans or it would be Hispanic people or something like that. So basically all the way through and through, it's about talking to someone where now we're like, are you a divorced Christian between the ages of 40 and 42? And like, you read that and like, a lot of this you can do through, Facebook's interface and targeting. And you're like, holy, that's HIT, that's me. And I think that segmentation is what's allowed us to scale so well and profitably, And then I think you were asking some of our methodologies and what we do. It's the same thing, except, magnified down to the end. So the top of funnel, and you and I talked about this, it's educating people on when they go to Walmart, what are, weekly deals. And then if people are reading that article, they move to sequence A and then engage with that sequence B. If they don't, they go to sequence C. And I think the easiest thing for people to equate to is kind of the idea of email marketing, where people are like, okay, if someone opens my email, then they go into bucket, 1. If they don't open it, they go to bucket 2. Now in bucket 1, if they click on it, they go to bucket 3, and that's kind of bucketing. I find very, very few people actually integrate that with their Facebook ads. A lot of people put it out, they put an audience, they go, call me and buy for me now. And then like, it didn't work. And it's like, well, you haven't taken people through a process or through their funnel or their cycle. It's like you go on a date with someone and on the first date, you go, marry me. And it's like, if they say yes, they're probably not the right customer for you or the right male or female. B, like, they're not ready for that. You have to say, you want to go to coffee, or can I get your number? Excuse me, can I get your number? Or how are you doing? And then can I get your number? And then you want to go on a date, and then you want to go on a dinner date, and then you go on multiple dinner dates. Hey, you want to meet my family? And that kind of same like sales to eventually you're married and you've been together happily for 40 years. And I think that's what we want out of each and every single one of our customers, is them to marry us and be with us for 40 years, where they, the lifetime value of them, they come back, they're referrals. I don't know about the marriage example with referrals here working, but still it's that same thought process of you could ask someone on a date and they say no. It doesn't mean they're not interested in you. Maybe things aren't right in their life. Maybe they just got out of a relationship. Maybe they didn't look that great that day. That's obviously a funny example, but it's treating people differently across the way. And I can get to more specific on what that looks like for messaging, copy, things like that. But I think it's really important to kind of understand the concept behind it, and then that way people can apply it to whether they're a lawyer or there's software startup or a service agent, whatever it looks like.
Sure. Yeah. So I think that's a great point. I think a lot of people, when they start out, like, there is limited bandwidth, but a lot of people think I'm going to run one ad to one landing page and then everything's going to be the same all the way through and they're all going to sign up. So I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense. Could you give like an example of one of the things that you do? Like maybe, you're saying like your goal is ultimately get someone on a call to settle their debt. It could be these 3 different things. It could be tax debt. It could be student debt. It could be credit card debt. Or you're even starting like drawing them in, even if it's not driving them straight to a call, you're drawing some people in through like an awareness campaign around like their finance or daily deals. So maybe do you want to start kind of there and like how you personalize it through that campaign?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll just use a shopping list example. I think it's easy. Everyone goes to the grocery store, but, we'll put out, what I talked about, kind of the president video. Now it's like targeting people that like Target, and it's saying, here's the deals this week for Target, and here's how you can combine them and things like that. And it adds value to people because we make printable shopping lists, all these things where what the heck does it have to do with debt? Well, it has everything. It's saving people money, and it's saving them in real time, and it's building trust, and it's helping them with their finances, which when you zoom all the way out, that's really what we're doing. So, at a high level, we'll put out these free shopping lists. You don't even need to give us your email address. We run it. We've got video of someone talking about, look, this week when you go in the bread aisle, all this stuff. And again, too, now if they take action on that, or they visit the actual page on our site that goes through this week's shopping list, and they spend X amount of time on it, okay, let's bucket them a little differently. Now let's start telling them about, see if they like the debt crisis in America. Like, hey, did you know that this is how much debt's in America? And then, they didn't engage with that. They didn't.
There's a second ad you're running. So like you run one ad to a piece of content, and then if they engage enough, then you run another ad to see if they engage with like a debt crisis article.
A little, and you know what? That might even be too fast. It might even be just like a financial crisis article, like how many Americans are in a financial crisis, where it's a little bit harder, a little bit more of a push. And then, we've got, let's say that tree now. Did they engage with the financial hardship in America? No. Okay, let's put them back into, here's how to get Walmart deals now. right? And then we're moving them with things like that. And then we might test like how to make money, or did you know, like here's scholarships, here's some scholarships you can sign up for if you have kids, for students. So all these soft ones. And then we'll keep every few hits, we'll hit like the financial crisis in America. Boom, now all of a sudden they've clicked, they're ready to engage with that. Ooh, let's talk to them a little bit about the different types of debt. And then same thing, did they engage with that? Which, we're watching heat maps, screen recordings, which section are they spending the most time on? Are they on student loan more than tax, more than they are mortgage, more than they're on credit card? Okay, well, they're on credit card, boom. Now let's move them into helping them learn about the settlement and the consolidation process, how that works. Here's our preferred partners. And, that kind of hand-holding approach along the way where we bucketed them differently, that, again, too, has allowed us to scale because we're not targeting just people with an interest in credit card debt where, you've got a finite pool of people where literally we can target Americans and we can move Americans through all these different funnels to get them to call in. And part of it's because there's such a heavy number of people in debt. But I mean, you take weight loss, things like that. Like imagine if you could just target Americans and then they eventually sign, buy your weight loss pill or something like that versus like, yeah, today we're targeting people that like Jenny Craig that are between 40 and 42, that are white, that have an affinity of this. You know what I mean? Where that's great. I think you need to start there. But at a massive scale, you have to be able to find a way to create the urgency or create the demand from just a broader pool.
So is the reason that you're doing this and walking them through all these steps, is it really to expand your audience because you're kind of capping out on what you'd be able to achieve just running it to these like specific debt interests? Or is it because like you're getting like cheaper clicks and ultimately it's lowering your cost of acquisition, or what's the reasoning?
You nailed it. It's both. It's both. One, scaling because the well runs dry on the low hanging fruit. I'm not saying don't go after the low hanging fruit, but the well runs dry. And secondly, we've found there's little to no, just take even like an SEO site, right? Like, yes, we want to rank for debt settlement, but that's really tough to get in there. Where now if we're ranking, this is obviously a silly example, but like how to save money when I go shopping, I'm just using the same thing. Like it's a lot, potentially less competitive landscape. Our competition isn't there. So we're really getting new eyeballs and customers that nobody else can get in front of and nobody else can do. So same thing here, when we're targeting Americans, like our competitors aren't targeting Americans, they're targeting people that like credit card debt. So like the example I said, where now the cost per click, exactly like you said, could be infinitely higher. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And then our overall, we're tracking it down to our CPA, our cost per acquisition, whether it's a phone call or if it's to buy our DIY product or whatever it is. So yes, we've not only found the scalability, but we've found one, the scalability, two, the overall cost to generate a new customer to be decreased. And then thirdly, when we get back to talking through the entire sales process, these people haven't talked to 5 different companies. So as far as our actual partners who need to close these people down to justify being able to pay us what they pay per call, they're having a one-on-one conversation with Shelly that Shelly didn't even realize that debt settlement was an option versus there's someone who might search, again, debt consolidation. They've opened up 7 different tabs, filled out 7 different forms. Now that actual ultimate goal of getting that individual to sign up is substantially harder because they're competing with 7 different people. So it's really all 3 of those facets that's allowed it to be just an absolute success.
Awesome.
We'll get back to the show in a minute, but first a quick thanks to our sponsor, Lead Quizzes. If you want to grow your business to 7 figures and beyond, you must learn how to generate leads predictably. When I first started my business, lead generation felt like riding a roller coaster. I would have huge sales months and then months with nothing. This happened because I relied solely on referrals and networking to grow my business. Predicting growth and investing in the future were frightening because I didn't have control over my lead generation. That was before we created Lead Quizzes. Now I predictably generate leads in my sleep and have stopped worrying about where the next sale will come from. Top marketers like Neil Patel and Lewis House have used Lead Quizzes to increase their lead capture by up to 500%. Think about it. Quizzes are fun, engaging, and you can offer personalized feedback in exchange for your quiz taker's contact information. Lead Quizzes is a software that allows you to set up high-converting quizzes quickly without having to hire an expensive programmer. In fact, our users have generated over 3 million leads for their businesses. Take control of your lead generation today and start your 14-day free trial by going to leadquizzes.com/podcast.
Yeah, I appreciate you getting into that. I think for the listeners, you've gone into some really advanced strategies, and I think most people probably won't quite be there yet, but I think it's something that can kind of open your eyes of like, what are the possibilities? How do you get beyond just running, one ad to one landing page to some kind of call to action? So that's pretty cool.
For sure. And I think to your point, Jeremy, it doesn't start there. So like I said, I shared the example we started with. And even if it's just someone on listening in that says, oh, maybe I'll put 2 steps to my retarget, or maybe I'll even just launch a retargeting strategy. I don't even have that up, or maybe I'll put 2 steps to my retargeting strategy. Like even that alone, you start finding small wins, and then it becomes more justifiable to allocate resources to really, really, really segmenting like I'm talking here. But yeah, no, I totally agree. I think the long-term thought of like, I eventually want to get to the segmentation, but the zoom out and then the zoom in, like, okay, well, what do I have time for allocation for today? I'm only spending $5 a day on Facebook. Like, okay, well, chopping it up into 9 different campaigns that, is probably not going to be very useful. So anyway, I totally agree with you.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. So I think we've gone through Facebook quite a bit. You mentioned to me that SEO makes about 20% of the leads you guys generate. So in month 4 of like starting this business, you guys acquired a site. So maybe you want to talk through like your strategy there. Like obviously this is a pretty competitive space to rank for keywords. So why did you guys choose to acquire a site, and how did you guys go about doing it?
Great question. So we acquired the site because the idea was, can we buy time, or the investment of resources was going to be the same. It was either going to be, paying, our team to build it out and scaling up our internal team. And then the run rate would have been, maybe 6 months on the road for us to get here. Or we could buy time, which was essentially come into a site that's already 10, 12 years old, that already has traffic, that already ranks. Boom, let's latch onto that and then be able to pour more gasoline on the fire versus trying to start the fire, if you will. And there's nothing wrong with starting the fire. We have domains now that have had 0 of anything ranked anywhere, had not a single person to the site, never even a site on there, that now got substantial traffic. So nothing wrong with that, but that was the initial idea for buying the site. And then you're right, as far as the competition, this site that again was a deal site, and it talked about like daily deals on Amazon and stuff like that. So again, how does that directly correlate with getting out of debt? Well, everything again too. And we're able to get it at a fraction of what, if we were to go buy a site that ranks for debt settlement, we're paying millions and millions and millions of dollars. Actually, I doubt even most of those people would ever sell, versus now we kind of take again that same thought that I was mentioning, where it's just a slight step outside of where the person is today, but it's a new demand, if you will, too. So anyway, that was kind of the thought process behind it. I don't know if you want me to go any more in depth with that, or.
Yeah, I think that explains like why you guys wanted to move faster. You want to get something that was like affordable that you guys could purchase, but was also still relatable. And so you guys went the route of really trying to draw on a lot of awareness, a lot of eyeballs, and you can start to filter them down. So yeah, I think we've talked through kind of the top of the funnel strategies around going from the deal side and then ultimately driving them down to the debt settlement. Are there any like strategies that you find are working well for you to like start ranking more of the kind of keywords that are important to you to get the traffic to these sites?
Yeah, great question. I think it for us, without getting too specific, it comes back to just really quality educational content. Yeah, it thoroughly educates individuals on the topic that they're reading on. And then it's also from that, it's allowed us to build natural backlinks, right? Where we're not even necessarily, a lot of our articles aren't even necessarily making pitches to third-party sites to say, hey, will you link us or do anything like that? A lot of it's become a lot more natural, all the links that came through. And a lot of it's just because of that quality of content. And then, admit a lot of it too is the social proof behind those articles that we're pushing out. And it's through that strategy of not just running an ad that says sign up for us. It's, hey, we produced a really, really kick-ass piece of content on, X, Y, how to make money from home, right? Something like that. Let's run, put some significant dollars behind it to get the word out there and things like that. But at a high level, I'd say if someone were to be like a checklist of what's allowed us to rank, site speed, huge to look at, focused on things like time on site, number of pages people are viewing. So making sure the usability of the site is great. So for us, we're always testing red button versus blue button here. Is there call to action at the bottom of the article that says, go here, things like that. So really it's just, Google's job at the end of the day, I'm speaking to someone that doesn't know anything about SEO, it's to put the best site for like my mom up there, right? So when she searches dog food, is she getting a site that comes up that's talking about food in general, or is it talking about animal food? No, it's specifically talking about dog food, and even more specifically, it's talking about basset hound dog food, which is what she searched for. Does the site move well, easy to read? Are there, nice high level bullets where it's able to scan down? Is there video on the page that walks people through? I forget the stat, 80% of online content is going to be video. So we leverage a ton of videos as well. So even short, like whiteboard videos, things like that. So our focus is really more on how can we make the usability of the site great, which I think turns into rankings versus I think a lot of people are focused on, do I move this tag here? If I put the word in there twice, am I going to get dinged? Versus like, no, our job is to write, like even our title tags, we write them like pay-per-click headlines. So first, we'll write it a really engaging title tag when someone searches in Google. Now, all of a sudden, even though we might be on the 6th spot, you see a really nice title tag that grabs your interest. And you're like, oh, wow. And then your click-through rate within Google is going to be a lot higher. And Google's going to be like, why is that guy getting clicked on more in the 6th spot than the guy in the 3rd spot? They bump them up a spot or two, so that, again, I don't know how in-depth or broad you want me to jump into any of this stuff, but that's more like the 10,000 foot level, like what we're doing.
Yeah, I think that sounds great. And we've got some other episodes that the podcast can listen to, like with Rand Fishkin at Moz, like Ahrefs is a great resource to learn some of these things for SEO. So yeah, that's really helpful, Anthony. Another thing that I want to talk to you about. So you guys are using Facebook. You've scaled that up a lot. You guys are going through SEO. You acquired the site, you continue to build on it. And so one of the things I think we may have touched on a little bit earlier, but this could be a problem with anything. Like if you have an agency, you could drive them leads and they say, these leads aren't good. They're not closing. And I think we've already addressed some of the things like, you put in like some stuff like SMS, more people will jump on calls. You guys put in, this press one campaign where someone presses one and then it automatically connects them with a salesperson. So you're kind of like optimizing the funnel here. But when it comes to like actually closing the sales, like one of the things that you did was you coached up the salespeople or these affiliates that you're sending these leads to on how to close the leads. So can you talk about like what you did there and kind of what the results were?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if you had to transparently take away marketing, internet marketing, all this stuff, what's been one of the biggest game changers for us, it's that understanding of, again, the full sales cycle. And for us, it's been the education, not just of the customer. For us, it's our actual, buyers or clients. And I think you and I talked a little bit about even, your guys' software when you get into educating people eventually on how they can close down deals, or when a lead comes in, what do you need to do to handle that correctly for it to turn a new business? And all that does is that adds more value to your software and to what you guys are doing. So that same kind of approach is what we took. We basically learned from and audited and understood the entire process outside of just lead generation. And when we did, we were able to take we'll just call our marketing eyes and ears and translate that into actionable strategies that we were recommending for our people that were actually buying and working our leads. We'd go in and we'd say, hey, here's where the lead's actually coming from. Can we post into your system saying that, so that this individual talking to you is going to be an African American that's Christian? And then can you answer the phone saying God bless? And then they started doing that, and the congruency from now lead to actual sales pitch became super congruent, right? So now you saw a Christian ad talking about how we're helping Christians, and now they answer the phone and you hear God bless. Wow, okay, well, I'm talking to the right person. Immediately guard reservation goes down, and then help and understand too with them are the value of the leads we're driving. We're able to charge more and not in like a greedy way, in like gives us more fuel to reinvest back in to make sure our lead quality is even better for these individuals. We can work even closer with them, things like that. So yeah, I think the education for us, our partners that were actually working the phone calls and giving them feedback and coaching them through and actually flying out to their sales floors and talking to them about even just the sales 101, things like that. Again, too, is you would say is outside of our business duties, if you will, if you want to quote unquote, like, well, that's not that's not what we do. We generate leads, but it's everything, right? And I think hopefully people can apply that to their business too, where, you sit back and you go, oh, that's not my job. Well, yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. If you want to grow, if you want to stay in business, if you want to, continue to become a big player in the space, you have to do things that your competition's not doing. I don't know one competitor of mine that's flying out to the sales floor and having a conversation with them and saying, hey guys, look, here's where they're all coming from. Here's where we see working best. Hey, Joe, I listened to your recording. Why don't you try doing this a little bit differently? And again, too, I'm dramatizing a little bit because I'm not stepping on toes of the sales manager and things like that. But the principle is still there as far as that feedback loop and education and understanding all parties involved. And I mean, honestly, anyone could take that. Let's just use your a weight loss pill again, too. Like, why you're not understanding which gyms these people are going to. Like, yes, you provide the pill or you're a nutrition company, but what gym is the individual going to? And how can you guys collaborate or work together to make sure that individual has a better lifestyle where they're just going to continue to buy your nutrition products, because when they're in the gym now supports what you're doing. You know what I mean? And that's obviously, again, just a silly example, but I'm hoping that it kind of gets the point across.
Sure. Okay. I have one more question on that. Like, how do you go about like learning how to coach these people up on like closing over the phone or giving feedback? So far, I don't think you've talked much about having had that experience in the past. So how did you learn that? Were there books or courses, or what did you guys do?
Yeah, great question. So first off, transparently, it was helping them understand the full nature of when that lead hits, right? So for us, I'll talk more specific, and then I'll try and get it to be more flexible to everybody. But for us, they would get leads that came in either through their websites or through other people sending them leads. And that was it. You're Joe that shows up for your 9 to 5, and you would all of a sudden get a form fill in, and I would say, hey, give Jack a call. And you're like, all right, well, I'll talk to Jack. And you have no idea who Jack is, where he came from it, well, before you get on that call. So I think that those insights or providing that was probably the most beneficial thing. And I don't even mean to necessarily sound like I'm a sales consultant that went in and provided a ton of value with the sales consulting and everything like that. But it was more helping them understand, and again, it gets back to segmentation, understand where these leads are coming from, to the point where we even set it up where they would get a little note when the call came in. They would get like a whisper message before that said like African American, or they'd say like Christian, or something like a motorcycle enthusiast, like where they would be able to then understand who that person is, even if it's just like a little tidbit of information like that. Mm-hmm. It went everywhere. Now all of a sudden they were magically talking about their Harley with the person, Harley Davidson, on the call. And the person's like, yeah, I have a Harley. And they're like, oh, no way. Yeah, I didn't know. So even though those systems or that kind of feedback loop, or I guess the lessons here are segmentation, feedback loop, and then kind of going above and beyond to think through, like when they're done with you, quote unquote, what really makes the full wheel spin was the biggest. Yes, I don't even mean to necessarily sound like I was going in there and Grant Cardone style, telling everyone how to create urgency. And it was more of what I just touched on. It's helping them understand the origination of the lead, the process the person had been through, you know what I mean? And things like that, where they used to just get an email in their inbox that Jack filled out a form. Okay, well, let me see if Jack wants to buy my stuff, so.
Awesome. Okay. All right. Well, Anthony, let's go through a couple rapid fire questions as we kind of wrap up the call. So you guys did $1.5 million in your first year, and you guys are on track for $5 million or $500,000 a month is what you guys are at right now in just your second year. So you guys have grown pretty quickly. Anthony, do you ever experience a time where you thought your business would fail, or you felt like you hit some business plateaus and you didn't know what to do, or you felt like you kind of capped out? And what did you do about that?
Yeah, great question. I think a lot of that was more in the service-based business, but I think when you're scaling, or at least for me, and I don't know how applicable this is to people on the call, I went from being the technician where I was really good at running ads, if you will, and then I had to completely switch my mindset to being a manager of hiring someone, and then an entrepreneur, today where I'm clear-headed, thinking vision, thinking high level. And each one of those steps, I think, is created not just a business kind of hurdle, but personally, I don't know how much people talk about that, but, I remember nights on the ground crying. I've been working 18, 19 hours straight, and I'm just losing relationships with friends, family, things like that. So those are times where you think about quitting, and it's hard, right? And I think that the things that got me through it and do today, and there's roadblocks like that, whether now I've got bigger, compliancy issues, like did we say something on the phone that the FTC can now come after us and sue us and put us in jail? Those are obviously much higher issues now, but the principle still remains the same. It's, at the core, why are you doing this and what motivates you all day long? And for me, at the beginning, it was being able to touch lives of individuals without having to physically be located close to them. So it was just the internet, and that's super broad, but that stuck with me. Now I'm working 19 hours a day and I'm crying, and I go, you know what? Go look at how many impressions you have. Go look at how many website visitors, or how many clicks, or how many clients you helped or worked with, or how many new patients you've connected with them. And it's like, wow, I'm actually, even right now, there's ads running in the background I didn't even think about. I'm making an impact on people as I'm speaking. Right? Wow, that's cool. And it's like, okay, well, let's get back after it. That same kind of mindset is, kind of helped me get over hurdles, and hopefully can apply to individuals. It's doing it for the right reasons. I've never been, I want to make a ton of money, or even checking how much money did I make today, and there's nothing wrong with that if that's the way you think. But for me, that's not what motivates me or motivated me personally. So I didn't focus on those things. If it does, then focus on those things, whatever it is. But yeah, specifics, I think, I could get into a million different examples, but I think that the principle behind what drives me out of them is, I think, more powerful.
Okay, awesome. And then what's the one thing you did that had the biggest impact on your growth?
Biggest impact in my growth would be taking on a business partner. And I think taking on the right business partner too. And I think this could apply even if you're taking on hiring consultants or something like that. I think the same principle applies, where it's basically just having someone, for me, it was having someone with shared interests or skin in the game as well with you to move through those tough times. So now it's not me crying on the ground. I've got someone to my right crying on the ground with me. It's not me saying, what do I think? I think this idea is good. Let's run with it. I've got someone to bounce ideas off of. And again, too, it's for me, it can apply this to consultants, or even for us, and it's kind of silly and high level, but we're not hiring anyone unless they're world class. My job at this point is literally to like high level employees or agencies or consultants. I have to go convince them to work with us. Like I'm literally like flying people out, or I'm flying there and I'm having a good time with them and I'm having dinner and I'm painting the vision and I'm talking about it. And like, that's because I don't want to anymore work with anyone or any company that isn't world class, because it's not, I don't care. We hired a consultant. He was like, yeah, I need $100,000. We're like, done. Doesn't matter. You're going to take out a bank loan. Fine. Let's do it. Like, I know you're world class, and it doesn't always work out, right? And not always perfect, but just that idea of like, I don't want to mess around with people that are okay or good or decent. And you have to be world class at this point. I think that mind shift more recently has been powerful for me. And then the earlier one that I mentioned, I think it was big too.
Okay, awesome. All right. Well, last question for you, Anthony. Like if you could go back in time and start over, what would you tell yourself?
I would tell myself to be more delusional with stuff. And what I mean by that is, actually, you know what? You'll like this one because you and I talk about this personally because we're close friends. It'd be trading expectations for appreciation. I think that's something that you and I talked about even just like a few weeks ago when we were working out together. It's just been a major change in my life that I wish I had. It's such a simple, silly line, but you know, you've got all these expectations. I find myself even like now, like all of a sudden I'm in like this massive tizzy and I'm like, I don't know if we're going to do $100,000 in revenue today. And I'm like, what? Like that was the goal. You know, and I'm like, dude, what? Like, take a step back. What are you talking about? Like, that's a great problem to have. You know what I mean? Like, that's obviously like a silly one, but like we set these bar and the bar keeps raising and raising and raising and raising and raising. And then if you don't hit that new bar that you just raised, you're like, I'm a failure and I suck, or at least that's for me. And it's like, whoa, like take a step back, like appreciate where you're at, what you're doing, things like that. So anyway, that mindset, I definitely wish I adopted much earlier. And I'm not saying don't have an expectation for greatness or, you know, a goal or something like that. I just mean if things and when they ultimately don't perform at the level that you're looking for, I think the worst thing you can do is get negative on it. And a lot of that's because of expectations. And I know you've heard it too. It's the Tony Robbins has I'm sure you can look up the video, but I'll tell it in 2 minutes. But basically he's going on a plane overseas and never have Wi-Fi on it. And everybody knows that there's no Wi-Fi on it. All of a sudden they get on the mic and they go, hey, guess what? Today, for the first time ever, we're going to have Wi-Fi on this flight. And everyone cheers and they love it. 10 minutes later, the Wi-Fi goes out and doesn't come back on ever. I don't think that flight has ever had Wi-Fi since then. And he goes, I remember being on the flight. People were yelling and screaming and cursing, and I'll never fly this again. Why? It's just because their expectations change, right? And I think that's so funny and hits so home with like us in our day to day. You're going one way, and then all of a sudden you have a new expectations and a change, and then now you hate the world, and it's like, whoa, hold on, you know what I mean? So anyway, I know there's a little bit of a rant, but that's definitely what I would tell my younger self or earlier self.
Yeah, awesome advice. I think it's super important, but it's definitely harder to put into practice than it is just riffing it off.
Yeah,
so,
I agree.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Anthony. I'm really glad that you came on. Like we've said a couple of times, this has been a pretty advanced episode, but I think even if you're not there listening to this podcast, I think hopefully it opens your eyes to the way you should be thinking as you get past 7 figures. So thanks so much for being on the show with us, Anthony. Where's a great place for people to either find more about your business or about you?
Yeah, no, great question. I mean, our holding company, siteflood.com is a great place. If you have any questions, feel free to just fill out the contact form there, or my email, anthony@siteflood.com is totally fine, and happy to, I'm usually pretty timely in responding back. Any personal questions, business questions, marketing, whatever, happy to help.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks so much for jumping on with us today, Anthony.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. Appreciate it. A lot of fun.
Thanks again for listening to our show this week. If you want to find out more about Anthony and the lessons he shared today or read our show notes, visit leadquizzes.com/16. If you'd like to start generating more leads for your business and get a free trial to Lead Quizzes, go to leadquizzes.com/podcast. Next week, I'll be interviewing Neil Patel on how he grew his website to over 1.1 million monthly readers and created several multi-million-dollar companies, including a digital agency and multiple software companies like Crazy Egg and Kissmetrics. I'm Jeremy Allens, and you've been listening to Journey to 7 Figures.